Excellent. Yes. Okay.
Excellent connection.
Yeah, I do.
Session and welcome you to building
Okay.
urban resilience, tracking and building urban resilience, or resilience from cities to national climate commitments here in the Waterford Climate Pavilion. Today, we'll hear from a variety of experts, some wire minutes of thankfully to achieving water climate eradication, just solution goals, and also how evidence-based tools bridge the gap between national targets and action. Yesterday, we no? Okay. Yesterday we learned about patient, patient, and also why water influence matters. And there's many things that we're today continuing in this show why political governance and that the direction are key. But of course, what's complex also trying to look a bit beyond that, especially as we aim towards the UN States water conference. The session is a timely one. The recently released synthesis reports for the biennial transparency reports, the countries track their progress on their seats, their policies and targets, as well as their climate adaptation and climate impacts. Water resources were already identified for the highest priority for domestic adaptation action. So we know that countries are aware of the importance of water for their resilience efforts, but of course they're also aware of the role of subnational and urban actors, as we've seen in the synthesis report of the recent release updated NDCs, national contributions, where subnational actors in their contribution to NDCs was increased by almost 20%. So, as we have a timely session, and I don't want to take away any longer from giving the local voices the space they deserve and they are asked for, I now ask a local leader on stage to invite Kian Pinheiro, Deputy Secretary of the Environment of the State of Osaka, from Brazil, to join me on stage.
Bom dia. Vou falar um pouquinho aqui sobre como que o Estado do Amapá está enfrentando a questão da gestão dos recursos hídricos. Nós temos uma política de gerenciamento dos recursos hídricos de 2002 e que a gente precisava atualizar e regulamentar alguns instrumentos.
She's here representing the state of Osaka, and she's going to talk a little bit about the management of water resources. They already have and now they are discussing how to update this policy with new instruments and mechanisms to really track all the water resilience issue.
O Amapá ele é rico em recursos hídricos, ele tem uma extensa bacia hidrográfica, onde a população, em sua maioria, vive ou em cima das águas, que são as famosas palafitas, ou nas regiões ribeirinhas, onde elas dependem 100% do uso da água.
So the state of Amapá is a very rich state with a lot of huge water basins, and a lot of its population lives on the top of those rivers in Palafitas, and also the ribeirinhos lives and depends on these water basins.
E para enfrentar esses desafios que as pessoas das comunidades ribeirinhas enfrentam, o governo hoje está priorizando a efetivação das políticas de gerenciamento de recursos hídricos. E nos últimos anos, a gente conseguiu elaborar o nosso Plano Estadual de Recursos Hídricos, que era o único estado do Brasil que ainda não tinha o seu plano elaborado. O Plano Estadual de Recursos Hídricos ele é o norteador para que a gente consiga efetivar toda a gestão de recursos hídricos.
So the state of Amapá, from all of the states of Brazil, was the only one who didn't have policy for water resources. And so they are now traveling, they are now trying to understand how to really strengthen these policies to help the population and to help the state to really have an effective management of those water resources, of those Amazonian basins.
Bem, e nós também, pensando nessa interação com a comunidade, nós instituímos em 2024 o nosso primeiro comitê de bacias, que é um organismo onde a gente ouve de fato a população, a comunidade ribeirinha, as pessoas que precisam de fazer o uso dos recursos hídricos. E agora nós temos um comitê ativo, onde a gente, enquanto Estado, governo, consegue ouvir os anseios das comunidades ribeirinhas para que isso possa virar política pública.
Vou ligar.
Since last year, they started
Essa câmera tá baixa.
to
Os caras estão muito doidos aqui, ó.
understand the demands of the traditional populations that really depend on those rivers. And they, this committee is now active. So the idea is to really have this open committee, so the demands of the population can really turn into real policies.
Nós também temos uma dificuldade muito grande com relação à execução dessas políticas por conta de recurso financeiro. Atualmente, a gente consegue fazer a gestão porque nós temos várias parcerias com o governo federal, através da Agência Nacional de Água e Saneamento Básico, onde ela consegue aportar alguns recursos financeiros para que a gente consiga estruturar a Secretaria de Estado do Meio Ambiente, capacitar os técnicos e, assim, executar várias ações com relação à gestão de recursos hídricos, principalmente com relação ao monitoramento da qualidade de água, monitoramento hidrometeorológico, entre outros.
So one problem that the state faces is the financial condition. But they are now with a partnership with the national government, with the water agency, to really strengthen the technical staff from the state, and also to help to build policies that can really touch the local community to really have this management and this monitoring of those water spaces.
E como desafio hoje, a gente enxerga que para que a gente consiga executar essa política, a gente ainda depende muito de recursos do governo federal. A gente também tem poucos financiamentos, né, que foram para projetos relacionados a recursos hídricos. A gente sabe que a maioria dos incentivos que chegam estão voltados para a proteção da floresta, para o meio ambiente verde. No entanto, quando a gente fala de recursos hídricos, a gente ainda enxerga essa dificuldade. E a gente tem que saber fazer essa conexão para que a gente proteja as nossas florestas. A gente também tem que manter o nosso recurso hídrico equilibrado e monitorado.
So the financial thing is also a problem because when the financing comes to the state, to the Amazon, they are very related to the green environment and not the blue environment. So it's really important to show the need to protect the water basins and have this natural resource really monitored and have a great management. So we can also capture more investment to those places.
Para finalizar, dentro do estado do Amapá, eles sabem, ela tem essa relação direta com o recursos hídricos, porque a população, em sua maioria, depende dos recursos hídricos, sabe preservar os recursos hídricos. O estado esse traço, né, que essa população consiga, de fato, efetivar as políticas. E nós estamos à disposição, portas abertas, para que quem quiser conhecer o estado do Amapá, é vizinho do Pará, é bem do lado, e vocês vão ficar encantados com a riqueza, com o grandioso rio Amazonas que passa, que é o nosso cartão postal, esquina com a capital do Amapá, que é Macapá. E a gente vê aí a grandiosidade desse rio e o quanto que ele é necessário para que a gente dê qualidade de vida para a população amapaense. Muito obrigada.
So, to finalize, he said that you're all welcome to visit the state of Amapá, which is close to the state of Pará, and it's crossed by the Amazon River, the most important river of Brazil, and they are really working to help the traditional communities because they really know how to protect those rivers, how to protect this blue and the green environment, but they need the support of the state. So that's what the state is doing now. They are creating these policies to really help the local communities to keep protecting the blue nature more effective.
Sabia que eu tô em tempo. Não, guarda se
Thank you so much.
Conferir depois.
For states efforts to strengthen policy and monitoring, but also the detection efforts. Working with the local communities. So perfect connection to our next speaker, in relation to Brazil, where the water resilience tracker is already initiated, and where we already see the agencies for the adopted water resilience as a mindset. I now would like to invite John Matthews from the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation to the stage to tell us more about the tracker in many countries.
Bom dia, obrigado. Thank you so much for your excellent speech, Deputy Secretary. It's very moving and powerful. Today, I would like to talk about the Water Resilience Tracker. It's a global program. It's been in operation for almost 4.5 years already, working in 15 countries so far. We have 2 more countries that we're about to add. And we have something like 20 or 25 countries that is on the waiting list. There's a number of people in the audience too that are actually involved in the tracker. That if you have questions, you see them around, then you should be sure and reach out to them. If you're working in the tracker, please raise your hand. So there's several regional representatives. So what is the tracker? The tracker really starts from what seems like a basic question, like how do we actually define what resilience means in practice? What does it mean on a day-to-day basis? What does it mean for the way that a government or a community or an economist or someone who's managing resources, a farmer, like what does it actually mean? And we try to take a complex but practical approach. In delivering the tracker, it involves quite a few different partners. So I'm with a group called AGWA, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. We also work with IMI, the International Water Management Institution. They're based in South Asia and Sri Lanka. Deltaris, which is based in the Netherlands. And ARUP, which is a British engineering firm and is very well represented in this room right now. We also we receive funding from the UK, from Germany, and especially our work in Brazil has been funded initially by BEAD, by the Inter-American Development Bank. In the second phase in Brazil, it's been largely funded by the UK. We're also part of a larger partnership in the UK that includes a focus on incubating water resilience projects in different parts of the world. Brazil will be one of the target countries. That's called the Resilient Water Accelerator. And there's also a focus on international trade and equity and justice there. But I'm just going to be focusing on the Water Resilience Tracker. So the Water Tracker really, it works primarily in 2 phases. The first phase starts with the national government, and in the case of Brazil, for instance, we started about a year. Inside of these agreements, where actually a commitment, say, from an energy ministry is potentially in conflict with an agriculture ministry or a cities ministry. And then we look at a variety of sectors to go even deeper. And then one of the really important points that was made by the Deputy Secretary is around finance. How do we actually make sure that when we're ready to come to a project and fund it, that we can line up actual sources of funding. That may be a development bank, it may be commercial banking, it may be even just reallocating funds inside the government. But ultimately, we should come to projects, right? That's the important thing, that we have really good projects, just as was described in the previous talk. So it's a global program, and we think Brazil is one of our real flagship programs. One of our oldest programs, also a flagship program, is in Malawi, here, and we've been working there for almost 4 years altogether, actually. But you can see that we have a quite ambitious program, and then many other countries that are interested in coming along. And we've had like some really striking comments. We brought in 2 quotes from Latin America, but I love this one here from the Ministry for Environment and Climate Change in Brazil, the MMA. Through the Water Resilience Tracker, we are asking the difficult questions in order to seek real solutions. We're using water as a connector for public policies. Costa Rica is also one of our very first countries to work in, and I love this comment too, that we've been able to use the tracker to think about bankable projects and really change the way that the ministries function in practice. Talk. For Brazil, some of the big outcomes. One of the most important is that Brazil presented here the new national set of climate commitments, the NDC for Brazil, and water is everywhere now. And we had a big workshop in Brasilia last March with 11 ministries, and they said, look, we now understand, like, water is our most important agenda in mining, in agriculture, in energy, in cities, in public health. And we have to make sure that we're thinking about water at all of those levels. We also helped Brazil come up with its first National Adaptation Plan, a NAP. Originally, NAPs were really just for the poorest countries, but in the last few years, NAPs have become much more important in middle-income countries, countries that are getting richer and wealthier, like Brazil, like Nigeria. They've started to also build NAPs. So the reason NAPs are important is because funding agencies, even private investment, looks at NAPs to find projects that they want to send money to. So that's really critical, and we made sure water is all over Brazil's very first National Adaptation Plan. Nepal is also a really good example. One more point about Brazil, and this is actually also very directly relevant to the previous talk. For the second phase of the tracker, we follow the government's guidelines. Like what do they want to work on next in more detail? That's the stage that we're in Brazil right now, and we're working in 6 basins. Earlier this week, on Monday, we had a workshop with the São Francisco Basin in the Basin Committee about the next stage. We've already had quite a lot of work that's going there. We've followed a similar process in Nepal, a very different kind of country than Brazil. But what's interesting in Nepal is what do they wanted to work on most? They wanted, in their second phase, they really wanted to focus on climate finance. So really being able to connect them directly to the funding sources so that good on-the-ground projects will proceed, and that they use this kind of strong connective role of water altogether. Thank you very much. I hope you'll reach out. The former Deputy Minister for the Environment from Afghanistan is Idris Malyar. He'll be here later today. He is the director for the tracker, but you can also talk to my colleagues here. And this is my name. I also hope you'll reach out to me. Obrigado.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you also for highlighting not only the water resilience tracker, but also the efforts to really drive the understanding of water resilience across ministries and across climate plans and commitments. I now have the pleasure to go on to the next flagship, as you already teased a bit, and kindly ask Dr. Greenwell Machaya from IMI to join us on stage and tell us about building urban water resilience in Malawi. Please join us.
So, thank you very much. Yeah, wonderful presentation by John Matthews, Dr. John Matthews. I think you have already done a good part of my presentation, so I'm not going to skip some slides. Right. It's this one? Okay. No, wait. Right. So maybe I can just start by talking about my institution, the International Water Management Institute. John already said something. We are headquartered in Sri Lanka, but we have offices across the globe. And myself, I'm based in the regional office in Pretoria, South Africa, and we oversee a number of countries, including Malawi there, Zimbabwe, Zambia, etc. We are part of the CGIAR, the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research Centers, which is a conglomerate of about 15 centers that focus on research. We focus on many things, including climate adaptation, food systems transformation, etc. Water, as in our name. So we are in the right place talking about water issues. But we also collaborate a lot with many governments, because we know that we can't do anything ourselves unless we collaborate. So really having our colleagues at Arab, at Agua, at the TERS, as well as the other institutions is the part of our business model. We cannot operate without partners and governments, of course. And in Malawi, we are doing a number of things, supporting the M&E systems for the country in the irrigation sector as well as in the water sector. We're also trying to see if we can support the development of digital tools, digital platforms, supporting, because the government has a lot of interest in. We also are trying to contribute to strengthening national systems for monitoring and evaluation, plus also interdepartmental coordination, because that's another challenge that I think governments face in this. We call some of those processes joint sector review processes, and we are supporting the NAP as well as the NDCs. So I guess as part of this presentation, towards the end, I'll talk about what we have done on the NAP just recently. So I'm not going to talk about this one because John has already talked about it, but the idea is this process is from JTWS. It constitutes a number of consortiums. So even in Malawi, we have all those consortiums working together. But here we are only going to talk about much of the water resilience tracker, which is represented by Arab, myself at ILMI, as well as Agua, and I guess data raise on the online. So, as I said, in Malawi, maybe I just have to say, because we know that in order to transform something in a country, you are not going to go into that country and find that there's nothing. You're not operating in a vacuum. You operate in a system where the country is already doing something. Every stakeholder is doing something. As a result, it's fundamental that when you go there, you try to be as consultative as possible. So you consult different stakeholders in order to start thinking about what is it that you can do. So with that in mind, ourselves, we're working a lot with the Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change. They are also here at the Malawi Pavilion. If you wanted to talk to some of them, you can. And the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, as well as the National Planning Commission. We are also working with the Ministry of Agriculture, but these are the lead ones. And then the reason we're doing that is because we don't want to reinvent a wheel. We want to make sure that we can capitalize on what already exists. If you don't expressly work with them, you are going to propose things that are already maybe done, or maybe they are not needed, at least not today. Okay? So again, I just have to mention a little bit, maybe there's also water witness. I think some of the things we have done them with with support from them to some extent. But ourselves, as Water Resilience Tracker, we have been the one leading that. So recently, we did we did kind of support the Malawi government in revising their NAP indicators as they relate to the water sector. This came out of a request by the government for our help, and that request came actually over time. So at first, we had a meeting where 100 people came in around March. We called it a leadership platform in Malawi, where we were trying to understand their key needs, key challenges, and some of the low-hanging solutions that they thought they had in mind. Then we consolidated some of the findings from that in the August meeting that we organized together with Arab as well as the Detares and Agua and International Water Management Institute, where again it was repeated that among other things we also needed to support the Malawi government in terms of NAP indicator revision as they relate to the water sector. So we further then, after August, heard other meetings in Mangochi district as well as in Lilongwe district, where the tools for the basis for those meetings were a number of indicators that the government was already thinking about including in the NAP, National Adaptation Plan tracking, and then we also organized some other indicators ourselves as the Water Resilience Tracker. And then we tested their indicators against the ones that we had, and together then started discussing in terms of which ones we needed to include or maybe refine in terms of targets, in terms of definitions, in terms of baselines, and which ones were conspicuously missing and therefore needed to be added. And the basis for deciding whether something was missing or not was really to just try to understand. The NAPs are supposed to track different things, including human capacity, including technology, including resilience, including adaptation itself, as well as impact. So with that framework in mind, then we subjected those to analysis and started seeing that, oh, you know what, there's several things that needed to be included. Now, that's not to say that they had nothing, they had something. But that something, beautiful as it was, it needed to be kind of augmented by what we had. So together, then we decided on some of the indicators that we needed to include. So the government then quickly adopted that, and as we speak now, at least we know that the NAP indicators for Malawi are something that are much better than the ones that were proposed at first. We are also now thinking that, not necessarily just thinking, we also actively trying to achieve that. We are trying to link the NAP indicators to what we call the joint sector review processes for the country. So the joint sector review process, it's a process whereby you bring a different numbers of stakeholders to the table, ask each other about what they wanted to do for the sector and what they have achieved for the sector. Right? And then you start asking each other why some things were not achieved the way we were supposed to achieve them. If that process is implemented carefully, it is a good vehicle for you to transform the sector. Now, the joint sector review that they are carrying out in Malawi currently in the water sector where we are operating has some weaknesses which you have noted. So we are already now trying to work with colleagues in the Ministry of Agriculture, capitalizing on also our experiences in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Uganda, etc., so that we can strengthen those joint sector reviews. We're linking the NAP indicators to that, NDC indicators to that, and hopefully if we end up having the management information system, which the government is already developing, we can then infuse those to that again. So we noted that the water resilience data feeds into water joint sector reviews, but also we're trying to support climate budget tagging and evidence-based finance alignment. Right now, I think colleagues are led by colleagues at Arab. We're kind of developing training modules to try and train colleagues, Malawi authorities on finance, etc., so that we can build resilience. But also several capacity building efforts are underway. Some key reflections as well as outcomes that we are seeing there is that collaboration and institutional work ensures national ownership. If you just go there and try to do something yourself, you might do a splendid job, but nobody is going to pay attention to you. Whereas if you co-create, you involve everyone else, you get legitimacy, technical legitimacy as well as political legitimacy, which you need in order to kind of advance. Again, embedding water resilience tracker indicators in NAP just strengthen coordination as well as accountability, and data baseline support, consistency with NAP. Okay, this is also something that is important. Capacity, technical facilitation, building long-term, technical facilitation builds long-term as well as analytical capability for the country. Looking ahead, we're thinking that what we're seeing in Malawi shows that water resilience tracker collaboration under JTWS can strengthen adaptation planning and reporting. There's a lot of demand across not just the Minister of Natural Resources and as well as Minister of Water, but across the board, that we need to do more of that work in Malawi. And I'm also saying, not only should we do it in Malawi, but I think there should be a chance to try and scale it to other countries. So Martin, you're hearing that, because when we shared some of these with colleagues in Zambia, they were like, okay, so why are you not in Zambia? So maybe we need to be thinking about that. But again, partners we are continuing to refine tools to link data, finance, and governance. But again, resilience is a shared outcome built through collaboration and evidence. If you do not try to collaborate, I think chances are that you're not going to go very far. So do it alone, you might just achieve a little bit. Do it as a collective, you're going to go very far. Thanks much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Greenwell-Machaya, for highlighting not only the monitoring aspects, which ties perfectly to what we've seen in the opening keynote, but also, of course, really breaking down the case of Malawi and highlighting the need for the collaboration, ownership, and inclusion of local communities. Thank you very much. That also perfectly brings me, when we're speaking about local and sort of urban, the city scale, to the city water resilience approach, where I now have the pleasure of inviting Martin Schuler from Arup on stage to tell us a bit more about the CWRA.
Thank you very much, Manu. So my name is Martin Schuler. I'm from a company called Arup. We're a consulting engineering company, HQ'd in London. But you've been hearing about the sort of multi-level resilience and governance structures. And I want to take you down from the national, perhaps a bit more local, down to the catchment or basin scale, and talk to you a little bit about our experience working at the catchment and how that links back up to the national scale, back into NDCs and NAPs. So who are we? We are an engineering company. We're owned by the staff, which allows us then to do interesting things, to actually invest in building our knowledge around resilience and other areas, but mainly around engineering and technical matters. And we have around about 150 disciplines that we can draw on. We've been around for a little while, and we're truly global. And that allows us to bring the best of our knowledge and experience to bear on problems wherever they might be in the world. But I want to talk to you about resilience, and water resilience in particular. And as we've heard, that resilience is complex. And water resilience, really, we need to start thinking about not just the system of water, whether it be clean water, dirty water, natural water, engineered water, but also where water touches. We need to think about water and energy nexus, water and food nexus, water and transport. And soon you begin to understand that water is that great connector. Water touches pretty much everything we do and wherever we are in the world. It's also very much an international thing. So for a long time we were thinking about water being local, but actually take can affect rainfall patterns elsewhere. And we're in the Amazon, and we understand how complex that is with effectively rivers in the sky. So we're all connected by that great golden thread water. Importantly, water underpins growth and development. So if you don't get your foundations correct with water resilience, you're going to find it very difficult to grow and develop. And we've been on that journey for a while. We started thinking about resilience of cities, but the cities that we were operating in, and there was up to about 100 or so, many of them were seeing that water was that fundamental resilience issue. So we took a deeper dive into water resilience and came up with a concept called the City Water Resilience Approach. It's about urban water, but it's also about connecting the urban space with upstream and downstream. So it really is truly a catchment or basin issue. So things that we do in the catchment affects the urban sprawl, and things that we do in cities will also affect the catchment. It's all interconnected. It's that system of systems thinking that we're able to bring to bear. And as others have said, it's a collaborative approach. So Arup have been doing some technical work, but we can't do it alone. We've done it with many, many others. And some of them are on the screen, and that list of collaborators are growing. And we're proud to be working with Agua, with IMI, with Deltares now at the national scale. But this is where we started 10, 15 years ago, working with the World Bank, OECD, universities. And what we did was deliberately choose to make all our research and the City Water Resilience Approach an open source. So you can access it, it's all openly available. All the learning that we found in the 25 cities and catchments that we worked on is openly available. And that's part of its superpower, so that we can learn from city and catchment across. And you can dive in. And others have used this approach, and we're proud that we're able to support that too. It's not just Arup. And at its heart, it's very, very simple. So before we take action, as engineers, we like to build things, we like to pour concrete or think about nature-based solutions. But this approach goes back. It goes back and back to actually think about the understand, the diagnostic. Why are things working? Why are things not working? But take a truly resilience perspective. Not just think about the engineering, we think about the governance, we think about society, we think about the economy, we think about nature. So how do we bring that all in together? But it also means that we have to work with the cities, ministries, civil society, industry, commerce. We bring that together. So it really is truly participatory. It's inclusive. It needs to be, because when you're talking about water, it needs to be inclusive. So we do that understand situation. It's 5 steps. We then, only then we start to think about resilience. When we've understand and landscaped the catchment, we're thinking about the strengths and the weaknesses in terms of resilience. What helps or hinders resilience? So every city and catchment is going to have its own challenges for water. Too much water, too little water, too dirty water. But also it's the governance structure around that, which is super important. So we need to unpack that and understand what's going well, what's perhaps not going so well. We also need to understand how the finance fits into that. And this approach takes an evidence-based approach. So everything basically is documented and evidenced. And that's really, really important. So when you start to think about making decisions, you want to have a strong evidence base. But it's equally important when you want to attract finance into water. You need to have that evidence to attract that finance. So bringing that all together in the City Water Resilience Approach. Only then do we start thinking about what do we do about it? What are the interventions we might make? Now, they might be engineering, but they also could be around governance structure. So they could be around data. They could be around sharing information. They could be about breaking down silos. So every catchment, every city we've been to, there is a degree of the stakeholders operating in silos. So how do we shine a light on that to see how we can actually make things better? And we also have that ability to learn. So we're learning at the very end after we've made those interventions. So we're bringing that evidence back in to the process and adapting the process as we go along. So as I said, we started on this journey many years ago, and we've adapted. We've brought new technology, we've brought AI, we brought data, we brought in Earth observation, new techniques, but very much the fundamental framework has remained the same. And at its heart, we have the City Water Resilience Framework. Again, it's all open sourced, and we can have a look at those resilience indicators and understand what's going well and what needs to improve. We can also see how those indicators can support or they can hinder each other. So we can actually bring that to life for a city and its catchment. We've also developed digital tools. So a really powerful but simple tool is the Our Water governance tool, which looks at all those stakeholders that touch water. Now they could be the obvious ones. They could be the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Environment, but there's lots of others. It could be mining, it could be the corporate water use, it could be data centers. So bringing them all together and sharing their experience, what they need from that water environment, is really powerful. But it also shows where the overlaps and underlaps are in that rich tapestry of stakeholders. Where are there more than one competing a key stakeholder there? We're perhaps confusing outcomes. And where is there less interest? Maybe it be on the interaction between solid waste and water. Is that the issue? So we can shine that light using these digital tools. That digital tool is open source. We make that publicly available. And it's an interactive tool, so people can keep updating the Our Water tool. So I want to bring perhaps some urban and city experience into the conversation. So we're currently working in Lagos in Nigeria, one of the largest, if not the largest, cities in Africa. And it's growing hugely. It's a powerhouse. It's not just a powerhouse for Nigeria, it's a powerhouse for the region. But it is suffering from water issues. Too much, too little, and particularly too dirty. And it's a very rich stakeholder environment, but they're all operating, or have been till recently, very much in siloed, looking after their part of the shop rather than thinking about it in totality. And one of the first actions was actually to bring those ministries together and form what is now known as the Lagos Water Partnership. So we started this work 3 years ago. We've developed it now that we've now got a convened body called the Lagos Water Partnership. So it can bring that decision making to the fore for the city and the state. It also highlighted a lack of data. It highlighted a siloed data that was available in privileged hands. So what we're breaking down those silos and bringing that data together so that we can form a complete picture as far as we can in terms of the water environment. That's really, really important, not just for key decision makers, but as I said earlier, to attract investment into the space. So we're talking at the same time with investors. So we're working with colleagues from the Resilient Water Accelerator, who's also part of the program called the Just Transitions for Water Security that you heard about earlier. And what they're doing is attracting that finance into that space by having that platform of rich data that allows that complete understanding. These are some of the issues that Lagos, I'm going to pick Lagos, but it could be any city. Every city we've gone to now in the 25, they've all are suffering water challenges. They manifest themselves completely differently, but many of the underpinning issues are similar. It's the enabling environment, it's the governance structures. So thinking about that before you can start actually thinking about the intervention requirements. We effectively, together with Lagos and partners there, created a call to action. So bringing those government agencies together in the Lagos Water Partnership, bringing the utilities in, bringing in the private sector with knowledge, finance and expertise, bringing in development partners, and importantly, empowering the communities and civil society to take an active role in understanding and shaping their water resilience. We're on a journey. We haven't got all the answers, but we're on that journey bringing Lagos together. So that's really powerful now that we've got a head mark, we've got a sort of mission, and everybody's fitting in behind that. So we've done the understand, we've done that diagnostic, we've made that publicly available. The good things, the bad things, made it available. We assessed the water resilience. We've done that in many different ways. but we've also been very inclusive, bringing in Lagos into that picture. It's their information. They own this process. We are now halfway through developing that action plan. These things don't happen overnight. If you want to do it properly, it does take time. And you want to make sure that you're actually investing in climate resilient solutions. They're not going to be just solutions for today, tomorrow, 10 years, but actually we're investing in the future. So that's why we need to understand how the economy will change, how climate is shaping that. That all needs to be fed into this before we actually start building out solutions. At the moment, we're effectively shaping that enabling environment roadmap. So we're bringing people together, talking about that data platform, building capacity where it's required, and really getting the basics right. So that takes time. You have to be patient if you want to get the right solution. So we're getting the basics right, now we're moving it, being brilliant at the basics. And now we're building that action plan for Lagos, the state, and for Nigeria. And, dare I say it, I think for that region. And we're going to have, our outcome will be data-driven, evidence-based, allowing decision makers, investors to have the confidence to invest in Lagos's future. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I think it's only fitting, as we started with our opening keynote in Brazil, that we also move back and then now have the great pleasure to invite Bebe Tapeba, the Secretary for Indigenous Health, as well as Camilla Rebeo Amui, to talk about the National Indigenous Water Sanitation and Solid Waste Management Program, PNSI. Thank you so much.
Bom dia a todos e todas. Meu nome é Weber Tapeba, secretário de Saúde Indígena do Ministério da Saúde. Nós vamos hoje poder conversar com vocês sobre as ações do nosso Ministério junto aos povos indígenas no Brasil. Essa atribuição do saneamento é uma atribuição nossa do Ministério da Saúde.
Good morning, everyone. His name is Weber Tapeba. And he said that it's a pleasure to be here today talking about the actions of the Ministry of Health providing water and sanitation to indigenous people.
Queria agradecer a Silwi pelo convite para nós estarmos aqui fazendo esse debate em torno do saneamento. O acesso à água potável, ele é hoje uma dificuldade enfrentada pelos povos indígenas aqui do nosso país.
He would like to thank Siwi for the invitation to be here today, and it's a pleasure to be talking about a very specific need for the indigenous people here in Brazil.
As terras indígenas do Brasil, especialmente aqui no norte do país, enfrentam problemas com o garimpo, com a mineração e também com o agrotóxico, resultado da expansão do agronegócio que tem afetado as terras indígenas.
The indigenous lands here in Brazil, most specifically in the north, are very affected by illegal gold mining, agriculture, and the toxics that are used in those practices.
São 305 povos aqui no nosso país, 1.600.000 pessoas vivendo em terras indígenas, e essa demanda de acesso à água potável é uma demanda que vem crescendo por conta desses impactos ambientais nos territórios indígenas aqui do nosso país.
There are more than 7,000 communities and 1.6 million indigenous people here in Brazil, all over the country, and those lands are affected by those illegal and contaminations and destruction that is happening in the territories, which makes the water access very needed.
No nosso governo, nós conseguimos ampliar o orçamento para saneamento nos territórios indígenas em quase 3 vezes mais do que nós tínhamos antes, mas há um passivo, uma demanda reprimida que nós precisamos cuidar.
today in this government, we were able to raise the amount of financing to indigenous WASH programs by 3 times, but it's still not enough. We have a long way to go if we want to reach everyone with water access.
E é por isso que o nosso Ministério da Saúde, a Secretaria de Saúde Indígena, por meio dos 34 distritos sanitários especiais indígenas, nós estamos numa fase já final de elaboração do primeiro Programa Nacional de Saneamento Indígena, o PNSI, que envolve o verdadeiro espírito de cooperação para que o governo federal, os estados, municípios e a cooperação internacional possa também atuar numa colaboração para a gente superar esses desafios.
And that is why we are building the national program to WASH in indigenous communities together with the regional districts that are the governmental arms reaching those peoples. And we are right now implementing strategies to build collaboration with different partners so we can reach further.
Eu vou passar aqui a palavra para a Camila, que ela vai poder falar um pouco mais sobre esse Programa Nacional de Saneamento Indígena e poder apresentar esse programa aqui na COP. Para nós é muito importante porque a nossa intenção também é de fazer articulações com instituições, com entidades, com possíveis financiadores que possam colaborar nessa ação de superar esses vazios, esse passivo que nós temos de acesso à água potável nos territórios indígenas aqui do nosso Brasil. Muito obrigado.
Obrigada, secretário. Tá baixo. Tá. Can you hear me well? Okay. Obrigada, secretário. É um prazer estar aqui com você hoje. I was just thanking him and he was passing the word to me. I'll be presenting about the program today. It's an honor to be by the side of our secretary, who is an indigenous leader that was chosen to represent the governmental agency that specifically leads the indigenous health here in Brazil. Obrigada, baby. Thank you. So today I'm here to talk about the National WASH Program to indigenous communities that we're building here in Brazil. I think Baby already gave a lot of context, but just to summarize, we have more than 1.6 million people, indigenous people here in Brazil that are spread all over more than 7,000 communities. In the Amazon, but not only, they are everywhere. Baby actually is from the Northeast, and they are all over the country. More than 300 different peoples live here with different languages, with different ways of living, and to attend them, we have the Indigenous Health Secretary that is made to have the access provided to them in the way that they need, the specific ways that they live. So inside this agency, the Secretary of Indigenous Health, we deal with WASH, water, sanitation, and health programs, and we are building this program to reach even further, to spread what we are already doing. Today, the diarrheal diseases are the second main cause of death, indigenous death here in Brazil. So we are dealing with a very strong problem that we need to face. And to give a bit of a context, we have in the secretary, we have the 34 indigenous sanitary districts that are spread. They don't follow the borders of the states. They are organized by the way that indigenous people are spread in the country. And you can see that they are all over the country. They are present in every Brazilian state. And they are not only in rural areas, but they are in cities. We have communities with more than 20,000 people that are cities. They are today in the Ministry of Health, they are occupying spaces, they are in have their own demands that need to be listened to. So we are building the PNSI, which is a short version that I'll be saying, but it's the National WASH Program to Indigenous People. And to build that, we build a collaboration level that goes from the interinstitutional level that deals with partnerships and governmental agencies to the very indigenous communities where we can talk to them, to the leaders, and listen to their needs. And to do that, we hired 34 researchers all over Brazil to go to those communities and to listen to their needs. They went to communities that were as far as 20 days by boat just to reach there. And when they got there, we listened to a lot of their needs to build the program that we're building. The research lasted for 6 months all over the country. So those are some of the communities that they visited when they were there. And you can see some of the pictures when they were in the communities. They went to the indigenous schools to listen to the children. They made fire talks where they talked about WASH problems and listened to them. And we also build workshops, both online workshops and local workshops with indigenous leaders that were all over the country. Also, not only inviting them and providing them what they need to go to Brasilia, the capital, to talk to them, but also going there to listen to their needs in their lands. Had 5 local workshops in the country. So what have we learned about those researchers and about what we listen to those communities? One thing that we learned is that there is a relation with water that needs to be considered when we're talking about water access. So there is some things that are not, that can't be substituted by a tap. So some of the uses of water can only be provided by the river. Some spiritual needs, some needs for fun, like the kids like to play. It's a way of life. They grow by the river sometimes. And that we can only replace that by putting a tap. So if the river is contaminated, their needs are not being fitted. Also, we learned that they have a lot of resistance to chlorine in water, which is something that we usually put in cities so we can help the water to be clean. But when it comes to indigenous people, sometimes the chlorine, it's a chemical that they don't want in their water. They're not used to it. So how we can deal with that? Sometimes if we put chlorine in the water, it can cause aversion. Or sometimes their traditional drink won't ferment and they won't use the water system because they need water for that specific need. Or sometimes it's too far away from their house. So we need to learn the ways of life so we can provide the right access. We also learned the importance of free access. We have some communities here in Brazil that don't have a monetary economic system inside. So if the water access is not free, then how can they pay for water? So here in the Ministry of Health, every water that we provide is for free. And we are very proud of that because by that we can make the access really in the way that it needs to be. There is also difficulty operating complex solutions at local level. Sometimes we implement very complex solutions and we say, okay, we're done, cool, we solved our problem. But then when we leave, they cannot operate that at the local level. Or sometimes we put a solution that it's too simple, but then when we leave, it breaks very easily. So how can we have a balance between finding a solution that is resilient, but also simple to operate? It's a challenge that we have. mostly women and children get the water. That is something that we learned too, because when they go to the river to get the water, sometimes they have to walk 30 minutes, 1 hour to get water. Actually, the secretary of once told me the water access to him is a very cost because he has back problems, because he used to carry water when he was a child in his communities. So, which that is a problem that we have by not having water, that it's not easily measured, and mostly women and children are facing these problems. Misunderstanding local context can cause conflicts. And we say that because sometimes we put a water system in the community that is close to one indigenous leader, and then we have problems inside the community and someone doesn't get along with them, and then how can you make sure that this access really reaches everyone in the community? So we have to learn not to have the right access. We have to learn how they really live. We have to be there with them. And communication is better received when led by indigenous professional. That's something really important that we learned, is that when we're having an indigenous secretary, indigenous professionals talking to indigenous communities about some things that they faced already and that they want to solve, people listen better, people pay more attention, and they want to build together the solution because they believe that the person who is building the answer will understand them. So we need to make those people reach the leadership positions, to be there, to make the decision. And I'm very proud to be by our leader, Vivi Tapeba, who is actually leading the creation of the national program, and who should be speaking here today, but doesn't speak English, so I'm here to help. And there's a lot of difficulty building structure in remote areas. So sometimes we have communities that can only be reached by small airplanes or boats. It takes 20 days, 1 month to reach the community. So sometimes you get there and you realize that you forgot the hammer. So you see, that's the kind of real life issues that we face, and then we have to deal with what we have. So building infrastructure in remote areas is very, very difficult. We want to build wells, for example, in some communities, but we can only go by plane. So how can you get a well machine inside a plane, a very small plane, because they don't have airports there. You have to land in very remote areas. So it is very difficult. And the work has to be adapted to the ways of life. As I said, I'm gonna go faster. WASH can save children's lives. I think that's one main thing that we learn. And the public policies need to be present in the territories. We can only understand their demands if we are there, which is why we hire an indigenous community leader to be the indigenous WASH agent. And that's the person who is our bridge with the community, who will be the one listening to their needs and working with us. So this is PNSI. We have 5 axes of structure, and inside of it we have guidelines and strategies. The strategies are so we can not only put the infrastructure, but make sure there is management of it, make sure there is social participation, and make sure there is collaboration. We aim to reach everyone by 2033, so by 2044, sorry. So it's not a long time, it's a lot of work to do. We're not very good right now, and we need to go very far. And we are building the network for indigenous WASH. already have local indigenous communities, associations, and organizations to get there. But we want to also invite you to collaborate with us. So the National Watch Program for Indigenous People is being developed with full awareness of all the complexity we face in the territories, but really be revolutionary to those territories. We invite you to build together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. It's been truly an honor and a pleasure. So, and sorry for rushing a bit. I think this session could have been very much longer, and we could have heard so much more from the Secretary as well as yourself. I would now like to invite all our former presenters back on stage for a quick round of panel discussion to also dive deeper into what has just been addressed, which I think is a key topic of the inclusion of local realities and how we really create these global and evidence-based tools. So I invite, of course, Martin back on stage, Dr. Greenwell, but also John, and of course also Camilla, if you want to join us again. Camilla, would you also mind? Thank you so much. So please. And of course also, please give it up again for our fantastic panel discussion participant. And yes, maybe we want to take a quick picture with all speakers, so I think that would be more than appropriate. Thank you so much. Please take a seat. Martin, I'm going to start with you because the CWA has been done in over 25 countries and have gone through an extensive process in its inception. And as we're talking about evidence-based tools today, I just wanted to hear a bit about you, about the process of the creation and the application of evidence and a bit of your lessons learned.
Yeah, thank you very much, Menu. Before I come to that question, can I just say what an amazing panel. Give yourself a round. I thought that was fantastic, so thank you very much. I hope the audience felt that was good. So I felt inspired. We've gone from the national to the catchment to communities, and I think it's that connection that's really, really important for water and water resilience. So I thought, thank you so much, feel inspired. But back to the question. The question I was asked is, the city water resilience approach is operating at the catchment level, at the urban scale, and I was asked, how we got to where we are now. So during my presentation, I talked about everything being evidence-based and open source, and we took a year and a half to come up with the approach. So we invested time with others, so some of the parties there on this slide earlier, the World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, OECD, AGWA, many others came to help us to understand water resilience. And we had the first stab of actually defining water resilience. The term didn't exist only 10 years ago. So we've come a long, long way. So we published that work, but we also piloted it, importantly, with 5 cities, including cities such as Cape Town, Miami, and Hull and others. So what we did was able to learn from each other and co-create. And that's really the importance of what we're doing, is collaboration. It's no one individual, no one country, no one ministry is actually going to solve for water resilience. So it really has to be that open, trusted way forward and very collaborative.
Thank you so much, Martin. And I think that is really off the heart of what we're trying to do, and especially as we learn more about the evidence-based tools and how we can apply them also across scale. On to the next tool, and John, I would like to ask you a bit about with the plus 17 countries the tracker has been initiated in. If you could have a bit of an overview of what really are the enablers for driving that collaboration and also bringing water resilience into these plans. So just a bit about the enablers we see.
I think the biggest enabler for water resilience is fear. I think understand that there are really large climate impacts that have already happened, and they're terrified of the larger ones that are still to come. And that's the reality of the world that we live in. And the world seems much more complicated than it did just a few years ago. It's also not just climate change that we're trying to address here, right? Like the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it changed the global grain markets. So in East Africa, I'm sure in Malawi as well, like food prices suddenly shocked because they were receiving grain from Ukraine. That also requires resilience, like these kind of economic and social shocks that are occurring. There are political and governance changes that are also happening. In my country, in the U.S., we've also gone through recently like some pretty significant governance shocks. This also requires a lot of resilience that needs to happen. And all of these issues, again, a country like Brazil, with some of the new changes are also in this kind of economic and political space, are the rise of data centers, especially in middle-income countries. A place like Sao Paulo or Rio in Brazil, they're starting to be surrounded by these data centers. All of these things, the political and economic shocks, the social shocks, and the climate shocks, they're all expressed through water. And resilience is the kind of larger solution that we really need to help manage that. And we try to change fear into something that is like practical action. And I think that's the strength of it. And I loved also the talks that were given earlier, like the sensitivity towards the local community, say around the issue of chlorine. I mean, we're those of us in the tracker, we don't tell anyone what to do. We say, what do you want to do? And then how can we help meet your goals? And I think that's this change from fear and anxiety into hope, how we think about building wealth, how we think about being prosperous in a time of really profound and deep change.
Thank you so much, and for not only keeping us with the fear, but also really driving us from the need to respond to shocks and building resilience and to really engaging the local communities. And that's where I also want to stay and want to ask you, Greenwell, from your experience in Malawi and particularly the work with the indicators, how we also make sure that these global tools reflect the local realities and local communities. So if you could give us a quick interception about that.
So thanks very much. I think for us the starting point is to understand that yes, we have global frameworks for trying to understand indicators, etc. But the success of these global frameworks in countries is to rest on understanding of the fact that they are not cast in stone. They are frameworks for giving you the first principles for you to design something. If you're going to win, then you need to domesticate them at country level. Domestication, in essence, then means that you need to have a conversation with stakeholders at the country level to see what matters there. What is it that you can do in order to customize things to the local realities? And I think the example of the indigenous community here, when they were presenting, are so keen to see that some of the things that we might have easily overlooked ourselves because in the local context they don't make meaning. They make a lot of meaning in Brazil. So if you come from that perspective where you're thinking that once you have a global framework, then it's cast in stone, you are going to miss a lot. And that can undermine the work you're doing. So in Malawi, we have done exactly opposite of just trying to take the global ones, but to say, okay, we have global frameworks, but in Malawi, then we try to make meaning out of them, into the realities of the country. So doing it together with the locals in order to embed the local realities, ensuring that the global frameworks have a local dialect is extremely important.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to extend the question to the Deputy Secretary, Clean, if you could also speak a bit about the, as you mentioned, the work with monitoring and policies, how you in the state of Amapa could reflect that with the local communities. And I'm going to ask Camilla for a little bit of help. Just her experience with the inclusion of local communities in the state of Amapa when it comes to monitoring and water resilience.
Bem, no Amapá é bem difícil a gente fazer esse monitoramento, porque nós não temos essas ferramentas. Como eu falei, a gente ainda depende muito de recurso e de parcerias do governo federal, e hoje o que a gente faz de monitoramento é apenas quali quantitativo, mas assim, para a gente conseguir fazer uma mensuração dessa resiliência, principalmente com a população, a gente não tem hoje ferramentas. E eu fiquei muito feliz em saber que existem ferramentas que contribuem, né, para que a gente consiga fazer esse monitoramento. E eu espero que quando chegue no Brasil, o Amapá também seja contemplado, para que a gente consiga dar essa resposta, esse retorno e, de fato, fazer esse monitoramento e alcance a população que está ali e que está enfrentando hoje essas mudanças climáticas, porque, como eles falaram, eles já conseguem identificar esse impacto das mudanças em alguns lugares do mundo, e a gente também no Amapá já tem sentido esse impacto, porque nós só temos 2 estações climáticas, que é o período chuvoso e o período de estiagem. E em 2023, o Amapá vivenciou uma estiagem severa, onde a gente foi pego de surpresa e não sabia como lidar com essas alterações, com essas mudanças. Então, eu acredito que a gente tendo acesso a essa ferramenta, a gente vai conseguir dar uma resposta eficiente para a população que está sentindo esse impacto.
Resposta muito longa, vou tentar. Okay, long answer. I'm gonna try my best. But she said that in her state, Amapá, they still lack a lot of monitoring, and she was really happy to find that there are international tools that can help with this monitoring, and that she hopes that it could reach also Amapá. She said that her state has only two seasons, the rain season and the dry season, and then the waters are really hard to track, and then she was hoping that we could collaborate to make this monitoring further.
Thank you so much. And then I would like to pose a question to the Secretary and ask, how do we ensure, particularly with these programs we have seen now, that indigenous communities are not only consulted, but really are the drivers of change and really are at the heart of these programs and at the heart of resilience?
Bom, nós atuamos na Secretaria de Saúde Indígena com um instrumento de participação social, que é um instrumento de planejamento chamado PDSI, que é o Plano Distrital de Saúde Indígena. Em cada um dos 34 de 6 nós temos um PDSI diferente, e lá nós temos as ações que são planejadas, pensadas no chão dos territórios indígenas, e essas ações elas são pactuadas no nível de prioridade dentro do CONDISE, que é um Conselho Distrital de Saúde Indígena. Então, a nossa atuação, enquanto Ministério da Saúde, ela se vincula às ações do saneamento. Elas não são ligadas a grandes empreendimentos dentro dos territórios indígenas, porque nos grandes empreendimentos, eles seguem a uma legislação ambiental específica.
So he mentioned that here in Brazil, the indigenous people are attended by, as I said in the presentation, to the regional districts that our organization has, the 34 regional districts. And in those districts, each one of them before, builds a plan that are built by the indigenous leaders. So they have a structure to build those plans every 4 years, and the regional leaders, local level, takes their demand to the regional level, and then in the regional level it's packed. There's 34 plans. So they don't have only one plan, but 34 plans that every 4 years, they are the ones deciding what is the priority of their needs and what the government needs. And he also mentioned that the WASH programs in the indigenous communities are not made by big companies that sometimes doesn't prioritize their needs and think about profit, but they are built by public policies, which makes their needs listened. So we in the Ministry of Health are the ones providing those demands.
Eu acho que é só importante colocar que as ações de saneamento do acesso à água, ela é da atribuição da SESAI. Nós estamos querendo dividir isso com os estados e os municípios. No Brasil há um pacto federativo, mas nós queremos também envolver a cooperação internacional, a iniciativa privada, os fundos que atuam nessa parte do saneamento, porque a nossa atuação é uma atuação muito importante de cuidar de quem cuida das florestas e das águas.
So he mentioned that we are building partnerships at local level with other companies and state agencies that work with WASH, with water sanitation, but also strengthen international collaboration so we can reach further, because he said that to protect the world, we have to protect the ones that protect the indigenous lands and the forest, which is the indigenous peoples.
Thank you so much for that answer, and I would like to pose one last question that I think encapsulates this a bit, as we've seen the local lens, particularly with the city water resilience approach, but also the national lens with the water resilience tracker. I would like to ask both you, John and Martin, how we can maybe see that when we go from national policies, that the aim is maintained as we go down to the local communities, but also how the feedback from the local communities from on the ground features back into national policies.
Yeah, a great question actually there. How do we link those national policies with local action, but also hearing the voices of indigenous populations and local communities? I think there's work to be done here still, but it's how do you maintain and take account of those local requirements, perhaps in your NDCs, your nationally determined contributions and NAPs. So I think the first thing is the work that the tracker is doing is to unpack that, and it's to bring that down to a scale where those interventions make sense. So we talk about water nationally, but actually action happens locally. It happens to local communities in a catchment or a basin. So having that direct line of sight and feedback loop is super important. So that's the work that we're currently undertaking as part of the Just Transitions for Water Security. We've already heard from the Water Resilience Track, and I'll allow John to come in there, but making that link is super important. But making that link so it works in a virtual circle is what we're aiming for.
I can't, I'm going to add on, maybe try to answer your question from a different direction. It seems like there are a lot of people at COP. I'm not sure the numbers so far, maybe there are 20, 30, 40,000 people here. There are 9 billion people that need water resilience, and they are not at the COP. They need water resilience in their very basic lives, their lives every day. They will never come to COP. What the tracker is trying to do is to take a new idea that water is something that we can really leverage to make resilience to all of these new issues, and some old issues too, something that we can address in a more coherent and an effective and a very practical way for just everyday people's lives, for farmers, for people in cities, for people who manage utilities. You know, as I mentioned a moment ago, I think there's a deep sense of fear and dread that people have right now. They're worried about their kids, and they need something that's practical, that they can make operational, that they can bring into their lives and know that someone is doing something. And the tracker is one of these things that we may be starting high, but we're going to try to go and have the lowest level impact. And honestly, it doesn't matter if it's called the tracker or not. It's the ideas, it's the operations, it's the impacts that are most important. So thank you so much for your time. We're really grateful and honored to be on the stage with you all.
Thank you, John. And now I have the tough task of giving us a little closing, and I want to thank again all panelists here for speaking and sharing their expertise with us. I think we heard a lot about today about the sort of making it practical, really giving the solutions a local accent, as was mentioned, but also really keeping at heart who we do water resilience for. And I think John mentioned it brilliantly that those people sadly are not here to give us their voice. So I'm glad we could use the session to not only talk about how we can really implement water resilience in national plans, but also make sure the local realities are reflected in that. And I think ultimately that there is so much need to talk about and so much more questions I would like to ask is also a great call to action, because there is so much need for collaboration, so much potential for collaboration, so much potential for working together. And I think particularly as we head to the UN 2026 Water Conference, this is what we hear in this partnerships, as well as local as well as international level, is what is in demand and what we also want to bring forward as we head to 2026. Thank you all so much for coming, and again, a big round of applause for a fantastic panelist. Thank you.